Hello and welcome to the Demographicast. This week I'm joined as always by Jack Street and this week by Olivia Lever. How are you both doing?
Good, thanks, Brett.
Good, thank you.
How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you for joining us today, Olivia. I think we're going to sort of just jump straight into it and ask you how you sort of got into politics, because we found you on Twitter and obviously you just told us a minute ago that you're studying marketing, but you're also the director of Blue Beyond, which is it's a think tank for young conservatives. I think you described it, a think tank beyond the Westminster bubble is what I saw on the Blue Beyond page. So I just wanted to sort of ask to start off with how you got into politics.
Yeah, so thank you both for having me on. It's a great delight to be here. So how I got into politics was, it was kind of quite natural. So my dad was a Conservative councillor when I was younger. So politics has always necessarily been quite a big part of my home life. I was never pushed into it or anything like that. It was very much my own decision. Then the 2017 general election rolled around. I wasn't quite 18 yet. It was about about 3 months before I turned 18, so I just missed out on voting. And anybody out there that was involved in politics or was certainly starting to become involved in politics, kind of at the time of the 2017 general election, will remember how toxic it was. And it was Corbyn's first election. And there was this big narrative out there that because I was a young person and because I was a woman as well, that I should be some big raging lefty. And it wasn't. And obviously there was kind of the Brexit thing going around there. So that kind of interested me as well because I supported Leave. So kind of a bit pumped up, angry almost, and kind of 18 and a bit naive and a bit stupid really, looking for a fight. Came to University of Liverpool and I fell in love with the city and I fell in love with my course before I got involved in politics. So I came here in the September of 2017 and there was not really a Tory society here. There was a bit of a remnants of one, and the way that what was happening was that a campaign manager from Merseyside was here and said look, I've now finished my masters. I can't really sit here. I was allowed to do the Freshers' Fair on a bit of an off chance because I was kind of just out the door. I need somebody to run this for me. So myself and kind of a few friends said, well, I tell you what then, let's get this going. And we certainly had the demand, so we just created the supply. And what we did was we set up the society properly. We got in touch with the union, and we held elections, and I was elected president. So that was kind of my merry journey on how I've ended up where I am now. And then for 2 years I was president. I did all the socials, I did social media, I got involved with student union politics. And I've had quite the kind of, not necessarily an exciting run, but it's been an interesting one, shall I say, being a diehard Tory in Liverpool at a Scouse University. And then June 2019 rolled around, and at the time I was in my second year, and I was going off on either I hadn't got my year in industry placement yet, or I was going on to my final year of studies, and I was like, okay, I don't want to do this. I need to get my head straight. So I left, kind of very sadly. I was very sad to leave. And I then found Blue Beyond, and I joined the exec in the July as student liaison lead, drawing off my experiences of what I'd done at Liverpool. So working with university societies, building partnerships with them, meeting them, talking to them. And then I started to head up our liaison department here, set up the liaison team, and then I got appointed as director. As our outgoing director, Luke, is sadly leaving due to he's just getting old and he's kind of had so that's the politest way. That's the politest way for me to put it. So yes.
What was it like being one of the most active Tories at uni in Liverpool? It must have been, like you say, I mean, it was an exciting, interesting experience, but it must kind of feel like you're behind enemy lines in a way.
Yeah, it was. And I think the thing is part of my personality is very much take me as you get me. I don't really care what you think.
Sure.
And I think the thing was, for me, I did a course that wasn't populated with political people. You know, my course is for business students. So the ones that are there, a lot are closet conservatives, really. A lot are just not very much interested. So it was very much outside the classroom. So I was kind of disjointed from it in a way that some students aren't, because the head of the Marxist Society or the guy who's a diehard lefty with the hammer and sickle in his Instagram bio is sat in their seminar groups, and I didn't have that. But yeah, and I would say I've had my fair share of kind of rough run-ins, as I would say. So I got kind of targeted by the Tab last year. I think they wrote in total something daft, like 5 different articles containing myself, or focused around me. But I think at the end of the day, I've always felt like conservative students, or, you know, kind of liberal Tories or Thatcherites, or any form of anybody that sits on that kind of right of the political spectrum, deserved a home in the same way that the left did. They deserved a place to go and have a drink with somebody. They deserved a place to sit in a group chat and have a natter and have a debate and do all these things that the left-wing students did. And I think that a lot of students don't really understand that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty lucky because we were involved in the political union quite heavily in our 3rd year. Brett and I went to the same university, and it was populated with people across the political spectrum, and we always had really healthy debates, didn't we?
Yeah, it was quite broad.
Yeah,
I was surprised, I think, to see how broad
there
it was.
wasn't a lot of divisiveness at all. I mean, I remember us, you know, we would sit down, we'd have our debates on a Friday, and we'd go to the karaoke afterwards, and it'd be, you know, the conservative students and like me, I'm more left wing and I'm a Labour member, and we'd sit down, we'd have a nice chat, and then somebody would get up and sing a song, and that's how it should be, I think, and that's not the experience that a lot of students have. How much do you think, particularly, you know, being outside of London, Brett lives in London, I come from just outside of London, how much do you think that sort of informed your politics, and in what way do you think that has kind of influenced your work, especially with Blue Beyond?
Yeah, so my work with Blue Beyond is it really did resonate with home. And I remember I when I first met Luke and I first kind of spoke to him, like he's from Essex. We have so much to thank from him, because he was in London and he was looking out, and he was like if kind of that like young 16-year-old in Canterbury feels disconnected, who's only like talking to really, what do they feel like in the north? And I think the thing is, for me, when I know a lot of northerners are kind of brought up with that thing of the south is very different, politics are very different, funding's very different, and kind of being a northerner, you are kind of brought up with that thing of kind of like, oh, well, it is like a little bit different down south. And I think certainly going to uni, you see how some things are different. So I remember a conversation with a friend a few months ago, and she said to me, oh, I just went to my GP for a checkup. And I was like, what? That is insane. So, and I was so shocked that can kind of happen. So yeah, I think kind of being in the north has influenced my politics in a way, that you certainly do believe in hard work. You believe in the value of earning what you have, that nobody's really entitled to that. It's very much yours. And I think, I always look on the Brexit debate, and I think this is the best way that it's been illustrated in our modern times, in the fact that, so many people voted to leave because we all felt forgotten and a bit left behind. There is the big immigration debate again, and there's all these headlines going around of, there is like twice as much immigration in the north as there is in the south. So I think kind of in a way, my politics have very much been kind of influenced by my own personal experiences, by kind of then also going to uni, and you see the differences in kind of what your southern friends have had to kind of experience in their lives, or what their education has been like, or what their experiences with NHS have been like compared to yours, and then even friends who live in, for example, in Wales or in Scotland, and how vastly different they actually are.
Can you give us examples? Not because I doubt it, but just for our audience to hear what the differences you've noticed are, because I think that there's people, at least my impression from living down south, is that if somebody mentions this divide, they don't really know exactly what they're referring to. Can you elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, so for example, one of the things is, for example, I was privately educated. Shocking, I know, as a Tory. But one of the reasons that I was privately educated was because the selections in education were so poor where I lived. There were issues with the religious schools that I could have gone to. They had very, very bad, poor reputation for the conduct of teachers. Or so my parents sat there and made a choice and went, well, do you know what? We can either shell out massive amounts of money, or she can go somewhere where she won't be very well treated. So, but another example kind of would be, so I kind of looked this up, and in the Northeast they have like the highest percentage of children claiming free school meals. Spending kind of per pupil is a lot higher in London than it is for a primary school child in the north. So, and it's actually quite funny because I was researching this, and in 2004, back when a lot of this like kind of like initial kind of change started, the spending, like children in London were actually behind children in the north. But then when they've plunged all this money in, it's kind of reversed it and all caught up again. Examples as well, kind of if we kind of go over the union. So I have a friend in Murray, and she was telling me that what the SNP have done is they're now making mothers drive 2 hours in the snow in -12 temperatures to go and give birth, because they are so rural. They are, they won't give them a maternity unit, and unless you are giving birth to an extremely simple delivery, which personally in my opinion it doesn't really exist, you're not going to get that, which I think is a bit ridiculous. So one of the things that's always kind of going around as well, and as I've got older I've kind of learned this, is that there isn't necessarily the gap as well between north and south, but it's between rural and urban areas. For example, spending per child in rural areas is a lot lower than spending per child in urban areas. Now that does kind of differ on many factors. So for example, how many children are in state care, how many children are receiving free school meals, and when I say state care, that also means things like how many children with special needs have things like that. So there is the north-south divide is, when you talk about it and you talk about these examples, a lot more complex than what people actually think on the surface. And I don't know if that's just a demographics thing as well. For example, you have a lot more children, for example, where I live in Liverpool, in these very, very urban areas, you have a lot more children on free school meals than you do, for example, for a child in the middle of Gloucester, in the middle of a little village somewhere, just because of the way that the demographics is. So I think that when we sit and we talk about this, it is something quite kind of careful to be discussed, and kind of more wide. There's a lot more widely things to encompass into the debate than there actually is already.
Yeah. Do you think that the reason that we probably haven't started to make as many inroads into this issue as we can is because we like to put things in those kind of binary terms, sort of north v south? We don't like to look at things in a nuanced way. It's much easier to kind of say, the Tories don't care about people up north, for example, when really the fact of the matter may be that we're talking, like you say, about something that's a really kind of nuanced issue that takes a lot of careful consideration. There are lots of factors going into why there is this divide between urban and rural. Do you think that's more the case, or do you think there has been some neglect from central government?
Yeah, I do think that this has changed, really, and it's like you said, it's a nuanced debate. So, for example, when I was first heading into politics in 2017, I was seeing the difference. For example, I went to uni and met people that didn't need to travel to different towns, to different boroughs, to different, I even went across like a county line from Greater Manchester to Lancashire, because the standards of education where I lived were appalling, really. So I had to travel. But so at that point, I think it was very easy, especially and I think this is the case with a lot of young people, to make those decisions. But as you move out into the wider world, it's like you said, it's not necessarily as black and white as all Tories hate Northern people. It could not be further from the truth. I think the last general election really saw that. I think the Brexit vote saw that. And I think we do need to look at this more carefully, in that what is actually happening in urban areas, what are the causes for this, why are there issues in rural areas, is this to do with the fact that a lot of the time schools will be miles away from where people live, is issues in kind of youth employment to do with the fact that there's not the infrastructure there to ferry a 16-year-old that wants to go and work in a pub. Do they have to ferry themselves halfway across a town that they probably wouldn't have to do in an urban area because there's just more resources there?
What's your view then on the sort of the way, since the last election particularly, obviously, the big caveat of the pandemic, trying to put that aside, since the last election, how the current Conservative Party have treated those who, many people have said lent their vote to the Conservative Party in the last election, and gave them the massive majority that they did. Do you see that being a success? Do you think that vote will continue to be given to the Conservative Party?
So this is quite interesting because looking at this is actually something that I actually covered in my dissertation. And the messaging that the Conservative Party put out the last general election was this one of Boris is going to help you, Boris will get Brexit done, back Boris. And it was that kind of Brexit message. But there was also this very much positive, hope, it's aspiration, it's Britain after Brexit, we can get all this done, we can have all this growth. And it's whether, you can bounce back from that. And personally, it will be interesting to see how we do. But for example, I saw a statistic on Twitter earlier that out of something like the 320 something days that we've been in lockdown in total, businesses in Manchester have been only open for 309 of them. So whilst the government have put things out like the furlough scheme, there's been lots of bounce back grants, they can only last for so long, and ultimately businesses want to open. People in the north, they want to go out, they want to go and see their friends, and it's a knock-on effect as well. So I'll give you an example. My mum and dad run their own van hire company. Whilst my mum and dad, yes, have been allowed to stay open during this, they have lost earnings because they can't go and supply the restaurant that goes to the wholesaler every week, because they aren't going to the wholesaler because of the short. So it's a knock-on effect, and I think that the party really do need to give out this roadmap out. What has been said and done has been said and done, really, and there's no point sat there mulling over it. At the end of the day, the north has been disproportionately affected. For example, kind of Manchester's been shut for such a long time. In Liverpool, I'll give the example of Mayor Joe Anderson. He's just been arrested for fraud. So, but then sat there and played the bargaining chip of saying two completely different things. And kind of said, we need more lockdowns to save more lives. And then kind of it's like, I need all this money from the government. So it's quite hard. And I think ultimately it's the bounce back. What is the government going to do next? Are we going to re-implement Eat Out to help out? Are we going to re-implement some form of drinking scheme? How is the vaccine passports going to work? How is this going to benefit kind of, the employment and what people want? So it's a tricky situation, and we're not being given anything at the moment. And I think this is half the issue. A lot of people are feeling so negative because there's all these headlines wandering around, and there's all this, there's one headline from the Telegraph that says, pubs are all going to be open by like the 1st of April or something like that. And then there's one from the Sunday Times that says they're not going to be open until August. So at the moment, the government is making itself suffer with its own silence, and it needs to come out and say something.
Yeah, the vacuum will lead to sort of misinformation being spread, won't it? And that's what I think is, kind of like you say, it will be so fascinating in the next election to see whether that vote is returned, because the thing that I've said since the last election is for the Conservative Party to regain those seats, which I actually think will be incredibly difficult to do, particularly after the pandemic and with Brexit. And I'm sure that we'd probably have some disagreements on Brexit, but I think it will be very, very difficult to win those back. What people in the north, the way to win back those votes in the north is to give people in the north something that's going to tangibly improve their lives. That's what people want to see. They want their vote to be used to for central government to pass policies that are going to improve people's lives. That's the role of government. And until that happens, until that we can see that sort of tangible change, it's going to be very difficult for any government to win back the trust of those voters, and rightly so. And I think we've seen the same thing in Scotland as well, with both the SNP and the problems that the Labour Party have had in winning votes in Scotland. It's incredibly difficult to put get voters' trust when you're not doing anything to benefit their lives. And I think it will be easy for the Conservative Party to use the next 4 years, get comfortable. They're not having great pressure being put on them by the opposition at the moment anyway, and really miss out in the next election. So yeah, like you say, it'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, and I definitely agree on that fact. And I think the problem is at the minute is that Starmer is having issues with the Labour Party. You know, he's still got the relics of Corbyn that are Rebecca Long-Bailey, that are Zara Sultana, you know, hiding there really. And it's like every time something comes out, you know, and they're coming out with all these really left-wing wants and needs. For example, you know, the scrap tuition fees is going on at the minute because all university students are being ripped off. So, but what Starmer wants to do is he wants to shed that debate. He doesn't want that kind of hard left Corbyn debate there in his candidates. And I think that's going to be his issue is what is he going to do? Is he going to bring these new MPs in? What is Starmer's new policy? Because at the moment, Starmer's got this issue that everything is reactionary to what the government does. It's not 2 steps ahead, it's 2 steps behind. So what Starmer comes out with will be quite interesting. But yeah, and I agree with you that they need something tangible. So for example, you know, kind of Nissan staying in Sunderland is a great example of tangible benefits. You know, Northerners do want that thing. But one thing that the Starmer will have to deal with the next election is this hard left Corbyn kind of narrative that if you are a Northerner and you vote for the Tories, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. That is not the case at all. And that is what lost them the last election. So if Starmer can weed that out of the Labour Party, then he's got a serious, you know, kind of chance at winning something. And I think it will be interesting to see what happens at the next election. Does Starmer have the backbone to reconnect with Northern voters? Or is Starmer going to kind of sway and sit there and be torn between the very kind of left-wing NEC and Corbyn's hard supporters? So it'll be interesting to see what happens, definitely.
Yeah. Sorry, bro, go ahead.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say, it's fascinating to me that we're sat here talking about politics and going, politicians need to talk about policy. It just boggles my mind that we're still in this position. I think that, you know, like you say, after the Corbyn sort of Starmer power shift, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I think that ultimately, if Keir Starmer reworded a lot of what was in the manifesto in 2017 and in 2019, the Labour Party would still have a good chance of winning power. I genuinely believe that, because I think that we've seen that there were policies in both of those manifestos that would have been beneficial if they had been implemented, you know, through this last year. But the problem is he hasn't you know, announced any policy. So we're in this vacuum again where who knows what the Labour Party stands for. And as a Labour member, it's incredibly frustrating not to have anything to argue about, not to have anything to get behind. You know, there's plenty of ideas as to what a good policy would look like at the moment and what the Labour Party's flagship policy should be. But not having the Labour Party commit to those is incredibly frustrating. And all it leads to is us not making inroads. And you know, it's my personal opinion that the Conservative Party have done a terrible job through the pandemic, and the fact that the Labour Party haven't taken the lead that many people thought they would. You know, we saw all this stuff about people saying any other leader than Jeremy Corbyn would be 20 points ahead in the polls. We haven't seen that. So the Labour Party obviously isn't doing a good enough job, and the Tories have done enough to kind of keep that core support. You know, I think that it's very likely that there'll be a hung parliament in the next election, and this kind of political deadlock that we've seen before will remain, because really we don't have anyone that really speaks to the country. It's a strange position that we're in.
Yeah, I massively agree with that point. And I think when you look at the polling of leaders that come out of YouGov and stuff, it's quite interesting because Boris is kind of always drifting around that kind of like 40-50% mark, but Starmer isn't that far behind, but he's still behind Boris. Now, obviously, in recent kind of weeks and months or whatever, that we have had the vaccine rollout that's been incredibly successful. But I looked at some figures the other day and it said something like 52% believed that Boris had handled it badly, but then 41% also believed that Starmer had handled it badly. So it's kind of like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think ultimately the pandemic and coming out of this will show the survival of the fittest. Now, Boris has got an extremely strong personal brand that Starmer is yet to build. At the moment, Starmer is struggling because he's still got the ties to Corbyn. Everybody sat there calling him two-faced because he sat on Corbyn's front bench, but now he's sat there saying, oh, no, we need to get Labour back to the heartland. So it's like, well, what do you actually believe? So I think it will be interesting to see what happens. But at the end of the day, each party leader has got to stand on their own 2 feet, speak for themselves. And if they are not speaking for themselves, the public do see through this. You know, the general public are not thick. They do know who is being controlled by a party HQ press officer, who is being controlled by a staffer writing their speeches for them. So it will be interesting to see. There's a lot to kind of wait out for, and how Starmer does will be interesting because, you know, you see bits of him and there's a bit of personality there, but then sometimes, you know, it's just kind of this pale, stale, southern man, and people don't want that. They want charisma and they want somebody to look forward to. And I think the issue is at the minute is that Starmer is seen by kind of the hard left of what I've seen of some of the hard left of my kind of like people that I go to uni with, that he's kind of no better than Boris in some ways. You know, they're both the same, that he's in essence a Tory. Yeah, and all this, like, oh, all right then. But then kind of, you know, Tory voters are looking at him and thinking, well, is that really it? So it will be interesting to see what happens. But I think at the minute it's very hard in the pandemic.
Yeah. That's your problem with Starmer, isn't it, Brett? The sort of lack of authenticity.
Yeah, the sort of he's just not got a particularly captivating way of talking. Doesn't ever ooze ambition, or not ambition, sorry, ooze passion. That's what I meant to say. He's always very, you know, he's got his facts and he's well spoken, but he doesn't. I don't think he draws people to him particularly right now.
Yeah, I agree. And there was that sort of forensic thing that everyone was banging on about for the first few weeks, wasn't there? Where in PMQs he asked some kind of good questions and had some rebuttals and stuff, and made Johnson look like a bit of a fool. But that wears off, I think, after a while. And you have to stand for something. You have to. There has to be some kind of substance to what you're talking about, and you can't just act in this sort of lawyer-like manner and expect people to get behind that consistently. I can't see it, you know. And those people on the sort of further left of the party, the silent or the loud minority of people in the party, you're never going to keep those people happy, and they will vote Labour. I can't really see them voting for anyone else. The, you know, Socialist Workers' Party don't field candidates in all seats, so, you know, they're going to have to vote for somebody. And you're going to have that voter base, so they can't be the ones that shape your policy, and ultimately I don't think they will be under this Labour Party. But similarly, you know, we'll get to talking about this later. I think Boris Johnson's got some issues on his hands in terms of keeping members of his party happy and balancing out his cabinet and backbenchers that have been pretty loud about both the COVID response and some foreign policy issues. So it's a really interesting sort of dynamic. I think the Tories are a lot more split than people think they are, and they you know, have always done a better job of presenting a united front than the Labour Party have.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that point, and I think the problem is in our party at the minute is that, you know, we have always been and we certainly did this at the last election. You know, we were the party for business. If you wanted to go out there and grow yourself and make your own 2 cents of the world, and build up your own fortune, we were the party for you. And now what we've turned around and said is, no, we're going to keep all these things in place. And another issue with our party is that it seems to be the view at the minute that Hancock and Boris are under the controlling strings of Sage and scientists. And then you've got all these scientists going around to Channel 4 and the Daily Mail and Christ knows what else, turning around and going, oh, we're going to have social distancing and masks until next year, which is incredibly damaging for business. And it's like we said earlier, you know, it's that vacuum. It's what are we kind of fighting against? And the problem is now is that you have the COVID recovery group set up, headed up by Steve Baker, who is now threatening a leadership election to Boris if he doesn't give a roadmap out, which I don't blame him to do. I mean, look, at the end of the day, there's always this big thing of kind of rebellion and what does it bring? Well, is that not the whole point of our democracies, to hold those in power accountable? And I think it's a fine line and a balance. And at the moment, Boris does need to show that he has got a backbone. He's not rolling over and saying yes anymore. He is making these decisions with the balance of what is best for business, what is best for mental health, what's best for our NHS in short term and long term. And what's also, good for protecting the vulnerable. So it's a tough call and it's a hard sell. But ultimately, I think now that Boris has got Brexit out the way, and this was said a lot, that once, the deal with the EU had been signed, Boris was a completely different man. Because at the end of the day, that is what he was elected to do. He was elected to get Brexit done. And now we have got Brexit done, he can completely focus on the pandemic and on the response that he's given.
Yeah. In terms of the back to the north-south divide a bit, I wanted to sort of bring up that obviously Boris Johnson was sort of elected on this basis of he was getting Brexit done, and that's probably a huge reason why huge swathes of the north voted for him. But when I hear politicians talk about the north, I don't hear them talk about it in very much of a relatable way. They talk about it as if it's a place to gain seats. But I don't. But now that Brexit has been done, I can't see. Personally, I can't see Boris or his ministers, for the same reason that I can't really see Keir Starmer winning people over in the north for in a relatable way. I don't know if you think it's because perhaps these politicians, Boris himself, Keir Starmer, are all Southerners in that respect, or if it's just that politicians nowadays seem to be quite removed from how people generally live their lives anyway. I don't know what your thoughts on that are exactly, but
yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's necessarily because they are both Southern.
Sure,
I think that will potentially play an element.
Yeah.
But we have got a lot of Northern MPs, and I think one of the issues is at the minute is this, the 2019 intake have literally only just got through the door. So when it comes to speaking up for your constituents, a lot of which disagree with what the party's doing, I don't think a lot of them are speaking up because they want to keep their jobs at the next selection for CCHQ, which is not necessarily the wisest move. But I think the problem is that if this pandemic had been maybe 12 months later than it already was, or maybe 2 years, maybe them MPs would be a little bit more confident in turning around and saying, this is what you need to do to win the North over, this is what you need to do. And personally, I think kind of this, kind of not necessarily connection to the North that is kind of present is a bit of a problem because, you're still funding things like HS2, which is just a big black hole of money, which is majorly over budget, which is majorly over deadline. But then you've got things like the Northern Powerhouse, which are kind of struggling to take off. There was quite an interesting article that I saw on The Independent yesterday, doing the rounds on Twitter, with everybody under the comments saying, oh my God, this is horrendous. With Sunak wanting to implement Thatcherite economic policy. So, and I think, a lot of the problem with the North is after kind of Brexit, after kind of 2004 time-ish, and Blair kind of said, let's let all these people immigrate. They all came to the North. A lot of the textile industry has not necessarily recovered that much. And kind of shipping kind of changed. So it's kind of how do we build up those economies? And I think after Brexit, there is a massive opportunity to offer incentives to European businesses, to businesses that want to come and invest here from abroad, from all over the world. Why don't you go and invest in your headquarters in Manchester? Why not come to Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle, and all these different northern cities or areas where they could manufacture and build? So, and I think ultimately, what MPs need to do is they need to get out on their doorsteps. They need to open up their surgeries and say, what do you want? The government needs to make that call for people to come forward, and for their MPs to basically grow a backbone and, you know, maybe swallow some truths from their constituents that they don't really want to hear. And obviously this is quite hard with the pandemic at the moment. I think this is a massive issue, is that we're having to handle Brexit, and all the strings that come attached to that, with trade deals with different countries, what happens to European nationals that live here, what happens to funding from the EU for universities, for example, or for like kind of the science sector as such. Sorry, I don't think I referred to it as the official term there. But, and I think this is the problem, is that people are trying to cope with the fact that, you know, how do we distribute PPE? How do we distribute the vaccine? How do we distribute testing? When we're also trying to juggle on the other hand of, how do we make this Brexit work for us? So it's quite difficult in a way, but it should be interesting to see how the party pulls through, and hopefully they will pull through. So, I mean, Sunak is doing a great job. He's got some great ideas, and I think he's the exact, you know, fresh-faced, young politician that we need in the cabinet.
The only Conservative politician, I think, that has come out looking more positive from coronavirus than they went into the virus with. And I think that if I was part of the Labour sort of formulating Labour Party strategy, especially within communications, and this is kind of, we've seen this happen a little bit more, that's where my attention would be focused. It would be focused on Rishi Sunak quite a lot. I think that's where the Labour Party have to worry, personally. Yeah.
Massively. And I think an issue with the Labour Party at the minute is that, you know, kind of their opponent to Sunak is Annalise Dodds. You know, I mean, and whilst she has, you know, she did quite an interesting response the other week, and she was like, we need to look at taxes and what they're kind of doing. And it was almost kind of this reminiscent of, you know, when Labour was actually electable. But now there is, you know, kind of things doing the rounds on Twitter that, you know, senior sources saying, well, some of Starmer's frontbencher's weakest points, that they are practically invisible, the likes of Kate Green, and then the likes of Annalise Dodds. And I think Starmer's massive issue is that a lot of these MPs served under Corbyn, and they're going to have to shed that Corbynite branding, that Corbynite association. Sunak's got a very, very swanky, swift personal brand going for him. You know, he's got the logos, he's got the graphics going on. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of people laugh at it, and a lot of people sit there and say, oh, well, like, why is he doing this? But it does make the difference when you're trying to market yourself as a politician and a person. And Labour HQ need to match that with Annalise Dodds. They need to give her a buffer over, make her swanky, make her swift.
To be fair, they are supposed to be announcing policy. Is it this week? And I read that it's supposed to be boosting Annalise Dodds' reputation a little bit, because a lot of them are going to be economic based. So they could potentially be already working on that. But
it rides on having something to talk about, having something to stand on. And, you know, Annalise Dodds, to be fair to her, what can she do when she hasn't got any policies to talk about? You know, it's a really difficult position that you're put in, to criticise the government and say, I don't like what you're doing here, and then not have anything to say, if I was Chancellor, this is what I would be implementing. So I do feel for them a bit. And I think we're talking about, especially in the shadow cabinet, incredibly capable politicians with respectable backgrounds. I think they will do a good job once there is a policy platform of shedding the kind of bumbling Corbyn cabinet facade, because it definitely existed. And, you know, one of my biggest frustrations of the Corbyn era was the inability to effectively communicate policy. I think that will leave, but it all rides, like you say, Brett, on having something to stand on. And you know, you can't win an election just on having a good Chancellor. The Tories can't just have that, and I think this is the frustration from a lot of backbenchers, is that, you know, who really does the rounds? It's Rishi Sunak looks all right. Whenever there's anybody else, whether it be Priti Patel or Gavin Williamson or whoever, they look pretty poor. You know, that sort of Nadeem Zahawi's done a decent job of talking about the vaccine rollout, to be fair, but then, you know, there's still sort of issues with some of his previous activity in, you know, when you look at in terms of sort of expenses and stuff, completely removed from the everyday voter. So, you know, you can't win an election just based on one MP, even though Rishi Sunak probably out of all of the Tories, like I said, has done a decent job. But in terms of the shadow cabinet, you have to have something to be able to argue against, because otherwise you're asking your MPs to do a poor to do a job that isn't possible. And I'd like to see them be far more aggressive in challenging the government, in putting forward their suggestions as to how they would run the country. I think that's the way that you win back power. But you have to be present. You have to be on the airways constantly. It's something that the government haven't done a great job of. So you have to counteract that, and they've wasted a lot of time already, I think. So, you know, like you say, hopefully that change. And it's good for democracy when you have an effective opposition. You know, we all know that, and I think everybody appreciates that.
Oh, massively agree. And I think that's been definitely one of the issues with this pandemic is that the fact that we didn't have a credible opposition. You know, the pandemic set in and we still had Jeremy Corbyn heading up the Labour Party. Yes, he was on his way out, but that leadership election was kind of on its way, and it was a bit unstable, it was a bit unsteady. But I do agree with you. I think Labour need to come out with policy, and that will give them something it will stop this reactionary, reactive, just kind of shouting and screaming that kind of was reminiscent of the Corbyn era. And I do agree with you on the point about Sunak, and the fact that one politician, to be honest, I think Sunak will be leader at the next general election. I do not think Boris will be here. Right. Yeah, I don't think Boris is going to stay, whether he gets pushed out or whether he leaves voluntarily. Right. You know, I think one thing that we can all, like, what has been said a lot is that, you know, in the space of his 12 coming on, you know, nearly 18 months as Prime Minister after the 2019 general election, he's had more of a rough run-ins than most Prime Ministers. You know, he's had Brexit to contend with, he's had COVID, he's been in hospital, he's then had the rest of the pandemic to deal with, and deal with the EU and then countless other countries as well. So it's been an interesting ride for Boris, and it wouldn't surprise me if he just leaves of his own accord. And I think Sunak will be a hot contender for leader. There's talks of Javid coming back into the cabinet. Kemi Badouche, I think is the way you say it. I do apologise for that pronunciation. But she's a hot contender for education. And there's lots of being people promoted. Liz Truss is doing a great job at the minute. So there's eyes on a lot of MPs at the minute. And there's a lot of kind of whisperings of what is going to happen, what's going to happen at the reshuffle, you know. And at the moment, kind of, Boris has got this problem that Matt Hancock, even though he's done what some would consider as an admirable job and he's put some admirable effort into his role as health secretary, is his time now up because he's had such a rough ride of it with the pandemic, understandably. Gavin Williamson, the A-levels fiasco, you know, all this bit about universities.
Yeah.
When's his time going to go? You know, he's on a ticking ticket here. You know, when's his checkout time? So it will be interesting to see what happens. And it will be interesting to see what happens in terms of who gets reshuffled where, who gets promoted, who gets demoted, and who may make a return as well. So it should be interesting to see. I'm very, very excited. And I do think we have some underutilized talent in the party at the minute.
Should we move on to current events, just because I'm aware of time running away from us a little bit? I'm going to jump onto the topic that is we've kind of touched on already. So I just wanted to bring up the fact that the government's been sort of facing quite a lot of pressure recently from backbenchers to ease lockdown restrictions sooner rather than later. Mostly from the 60 MPs that make up the CRG, which I believe stands for Coronavirus Recovery Group. However, Downing Street over the last couple of days, I can't remember if it was yesterday or at the weekend, basically said that they aren't going to ease lockdown restrictions until they know that it's safe to do so, following the guidance of their scientists and medical experts. Obviously, this isn't the first time that the government has ignored their backbenchers over the last year, but do you think this is the right move from the government?
I think it's it's tricky because at the moment you have, and it's kind of what I said earlier, is that you have these scientists coming out saying, oh, we need to be socially distant in place till next year. And what then happens is that the media picks up on it. And then all people are hearing at the minute is that a scientist is saying something, and it's viewed as a homogenous group. It's viewed as a they all parroting the same thing. So what people then automatically presume is that somebody's then saying that to Boris in number 10 Downing Street, which is not necessarily the case. So, and I think at the minute, a lot of people are frustrated. It's, we've had like quite a rough lockdown. People were separated from loved ones over Christmas time. And I think the issue is now is that I know a lot of young people are getting very frustrated because we're last in the queue to get the vaccine. We're still in national lockdown. So technically it's still illegal for us to be able to go and hug our grandparents, even though they are technically really safe from the virus in a somewhat way. So there's a lot of frustrations, and ultimately this roadmap needs to be put out. The vacuum is creating an issue, and a lot of business owners are very, very frustrated. A lot of NHS staff are also then, on the other hand, equally frustrated because they're like, well, we went through one peak, and because you opened up, we then went for another peak. And it's this kind of, I don't want to say it's a horseshoe where both sides are arguing one thing and they're actually quite similar to each other, but kind of not in a way. Does that make sense? So, but ultimately, people are sick of lockdowns. People are sick of being stuck in the house. They're sick of not being able to go and do things that are pleasurable. And I remember, kind of in the last lockdown, we didn't really have much timelines for elsewhere, but then, as we started to move towards June time, they said, oh, in 2 weeks, non-essential retail will open. And at the start of July, we'll have this kind of Independence Day where pubs and restaurants can open, and I don't know whether I'm just speaking for myself here, but I think my Instagram story was filled with every single person was in the pub, or they were out for a meal, or they were out in some form of beer garden. And then 2 weeks later, the gym's open. So I think the problem is that a lot of people are angry, they're frustrated. In first lockdown, we could all go and sit in the garden. You could kind of go for a walk in the sunshine, where now it's quite difficult because it's still dark at 5 o'clock. Yes, it's getting warmer because it's starting to move to February, but and it's understandable for the government in a way because there's a lot of this thing of, oh, well, eat out to help out is the reason why we've had to lock down again. So, to be honest, in my personal opinion, I don't think the government will ever do anything right. In the eyes of a lot of people, it's a lose-lose situation for them, because on one hand you have the business owners that want to open up because their businesses are dying, and then on the other hand you've got NHS staff and you have people who are at risk from COVID saying, please keep us locked in. It's not safe to go out still. The NHS is still under immense amount of strain, and critical care is still full to the brim and stuff like this. So it's a difficult situation for number 10, and to be honest, I don't think they'll ever win. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think, I think I kind of sort of agree with you in some regard. I think that there will always be people that will disagree with what the government does. I think that's the same with any government. But for me, the most important thing is that you have to make a decision and you have to stick by it. And if we're going back to the start of the pandemic, in my view, the reason that we're in the situation that we're in is because decisions were put off and put off and put off, and then we got to the point where we were being forced into making decisions. Pressure gave into pressure too soon. The right protections weren't put in place early enough, and therefore we were kind of left in this vicious cycle of we have to stay in lockdown because contagions are so high, but a strict enough form of lockdown wasn't instituted. So people were kind of in this sort of limbo situation where we were still able to go and do some stuff. The virus was still out of control. And then we had this harsh lockdown, businesses damaged for a long period of time. And, all this time later, we're still we're a little bit further on thankfully because of the vaccine in defeating the virus. But really for businesses, it's been a year of emptiness. I can't imagine what it must be like to own a bar or a pub or a restaurant or a small business on the high street. It must be a horrible time. And really, that indecisiveness has been the issue, and it's my personal opinion that the responsibility lies with our leaders, and it's their job. It's Boris Johnson's role. The reason that he went up for election was to say, I'm the person that can shepherd the country through whatever time comes up. Obviously, he's faced problems in terms of backbenchers. I think it's always healthy to have groups, no matter what party they're in, challenge the government. I think that there are certain individuals in the CRG whose views border on the ridiculous. However, it's important to have different voices, and it's good for the government. It keeps them on their toes. Politically, it puts Boris Johnson in a really interesting position. And I think not only have we seen backbenchers speak out on COVID, we've also seen this new intake of MPs speak out on the lack of financial protections for businesses in the north, in the Midlands. We've seen backbenchers speak out against the genocide amendment that has recently come forward. Ian Duncan Smith has been instrumental in leading this support for the genocide amendment that passed through the Lords. Lots of really disgruntled Conservative MPs in Parliament at the moment who are really unhappy for many different reasons about the way that the country is being run. So politically, it leaves Boris Johnson in a really interesting position, and this is why, coming back to what you said earlier, Olivia, about Steve Baker and this group leading a leadership challenge. Has Boris Johnson got it in him to fend that off politically? Has he got the energy after the year he's had? But has he got the ability to be able to fend off that challenge? Because I think you have people like Rishi Sunak, who Boris Johnson thought would be a safe appointment to Chancellor, who wasn't really going to challenge him too much, who was just going to kind of do what he said, has been a bright spark and has been someone that clearly has aspirations. And if the opportunity arises, I can see Rishi Sunak taking that opportunity. So I think that, looking at it from a political point of view, it leaves the government in a really precarious position.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think whether Boris comes out of this, I had the opinion for a long time that Boris had his Theresa May 2017 general election moment. So if we look at Theresa May, she lasted, nearly 2 years after the general election. She suffered multiple no confidence votes, but then at the end of the day, she still had to step down. So, and the thing at the time is that, if she was a man, she would have been there a lot longer than she was. So personally, I think after Brexit, I'm starting to sway towards more, if he's going to go, it's going to be not for another year or two, because kind of previously I had the prediction that he would only last maybe until the end of 2021, if on the optimistic scale. But I think he's got some serious competition, and I think he does know that. And I think the problem with the government is that they're continuously polling positively. If polls were dreadful, and it was like Labour were leading ahead consistently for maybe 2 months, on the trot, we probably would change tack, but we're not. So at the minute, it's quite hard. And I think kind of going off the 2019 intake, it's quite interesting because party members actually have the opposite opinion of them. Party, kind of members have this opinion that a lot of them are following it around like sheep. They dare not rebel because they want a position. There are rumours of, people having to back certain amendments and back certain bills, the prospect of a job in the next 12 months. So it's quite interesting. But ultimately, Boris has got some issues. He's got some issues with China as well. It's quite interesting you mention the Uyghur Muslims genocide. We actually did an event at that on Blue Beyond the other week.
Yeah, which was great, by the way.
Thank you. It was a really good event and it was really insightful. And I think what is happening with that is completely and utterly abhorrent. It's abhorrent that our government is ignoring it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, our issue is this pandemic. And I think kind of Boris has got this opinion that there is, he needs to look after the vaccine rollout. He needs to look after this kind of how many deaths are per day, what is happening now. So, and this is the issue. But if Boris doesn't kind of basically sort himself out in the bluntest of terms. He is going to face a leadership election, and it's whether Sunak stabs him in the back.
Yeah.
And that's me. I don't know whether Sunak will.
Right. What's the feeling like, because you'll know this better than we do, among sort of party members about the way the party's being led at the moment?
So I think there is a lot of distaste towards, I mean, it's kind of split, because what happened before Christmas is that you actually had a lot of people leave. People just took their memberships, ripped them up, and left the party. And now the people that are left are the people that have that are kind of of the opinion, you know, I'm not very happy with lockdown, but at the end of the day, I'm going to stay, because if I leave, it's, you know, who's gonna, it's kind of that old thing of, well, if you leave, all you then let happen is all the things that you hated kind of take over and transform. So are you not better to stay, vocalize how you feel, and fight for something? So a lot of people are not keen on lockdown, and a lot of people are very fed up. But then you also have kind of one wing of the party that's kind of a bit like, oh, the government are doing really well, you know, we should be locking up. So it depends on what kind of camp you sit in. At the minute, I think it's very split. I think kind of the anger has died down a lot. Before Christmas, a lot of people were very, very annoyed. They weren't very happy. We'd had our conference cancelled, you know.
Was that based on re-entering lockdown again? The fact that the people leaving before Christmas? Or was that more based on the reversal of the decision to suddenly cancel Christmas after the decision to open up again after the last lockdown?
Yeah. Which one was it? And this is a good thing. And every new decision that got made, we lost members. People left. So it was kind of like this thing of, it didn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like when was people cut off points, and it was just kind of one thing happened 1 week, and some people would leave 3 weeks later, something else, people would leave. So, and I think that kind of like all the people that are left now are those that are kind of fed up and are angry, but are just kind of sticking with it, because there's also the opinion that why leave if there's a leadership election on the horizon? Because obviously you have to be a party member for so long to then vote in a leadership election. I think it's like 6 months.
Right.
So that's why a lot of people are staying as well, because they want to vote in a leadership
election. One of the reasons why I thought that, or the reason that I thought that Boris Johnson was making the right decision and his government were making the right decision by ignoring the backbenchers on their calls to ease lockdown restrictions, is because I think this is what they should have done from the beginning. As in, they should have been at the end of the first lockdown, they should have been paying more attention to the numbers and to what scientists and medical experts were telling them before easing the lockdown, because we've ended up having another 2. And Boris Johnson's own words recently were him saying that the reason he doesn't want to open up quickly is because he wants this to be the last lockdown. He doesn't want to have more. And I think that, obviously, I think that if this tactic had happened sooner, then they may not have lost all these members that they supposedly lost each time a decision was made. To me, I've been reading a book recently that's called Quiet. It's about introversion and extroversion. But they were talking about how extroverts are more likely to this is related, so bear with me. How extroverts are more likely to make the decision that affects them straight away rather than the one that affects them later on down the line. And I think that it applies here, where people just need to be patient, because if we open up again too soon, then we know what the repercussions of that are. I know the argument is that the vaccine rollout is happening. All right.
I was with you when we were making that argument 8 months ago. I was with you when we were making that argument, you know, in April.
2 months ago.
2 months ago. I'd be with you when we were making that argument in Christmas, when, you know, they reversed on the other decision. But there's only so long that you can tell people whose lives are being decimated by lockdown or the virus, their mental health is being crushed. Just be patient, you know. And I appreciate what you're saying. I think that's the reason that those decisions were made. But that wears thin after a while.
Sure.
Which is
why they should have done it to begin with.
Exactly.
Because they wouldn't have had all this to deal with now.
At some point, you just make a fucking decision. right?
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of where I'm left with, and stick with it and let's see it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think the point is as well is that people are being the word selfish is being used, and I don't like that term.
No.
Because at the end of the day, when you go out and vote, when you go and make any form of decision, generally that revolves around you. That revolves around your income. It revolves around the effect on your health, surrounding family. So that's how you make your decisions. And it's very understandable that a lot of people are saying, let's take that personal responsibility, and I'll take young people as this massive example. And I know this is certainly a grievance among the younger members of the party, that there is no policy on young people at the minute. There is no kind of consideration. Nobody's listening to us. Nobody's hearing us out. We're just kind of sat there and being kind of chewed off, and they're saying, oh no, like, you could wait, be patient. And it's understandable. And I think a lot of people were willing to do that at the last lockdown because the economic effects weren't so present. You know, this kind of sharp drop in GDP that we've seen, this kind of economy shrinkage that we've seen. So, and it's very understandable, because now I know certainly for myself, my cohort of graduates that I'm like on the course with, we're all sat here looking at ourselves going, how are we going to get a job? How are we going to sat there into the job market? How are we going to buy a house? And there's lots of issues that were already very present with young people that now have been kind of emphasized with COVID. I'll take the university's example for one case. You know, we're being charged $9,000 a year for online lectures. You know, a few PowerPoint slides, and maybe a few clips of audio. Yeah, and it's ridiculous. And where there was this thing previously that were students being ripped off by universities when they were face-to-face, and it was very hard to prove, because it was like, well, it depends on the standard you're teaching. Now it's all online. It almost provides that platform that, you know what, students, they are being ripped off, because you cannot expect for you to turn around and say to students, you have to come in face-to-face for however many years, and then now say you're getting the same standard when you move it all online. So, and nobody's doing anything about it. Everybody's sat there just looking at each other and going, no, we're not doing anything. So, you know, and I think this is why, you know, I mean, certainly I'm going to take it off my own university examples, that compliance with kind of COVID restrictions are getting lower. And I think that, I don't think all students are doing it. I think that's an unfair misrepresentation from the media and from the Karen and Gammon tabloids that you see, you know, the Daily Mail, the Mirror. And it's very unfair, you know, and it's like a lot of people are sat there. They've not been able to work in a pub. They've not been able to go and work in their part-time work. A lot of students are also struggling for part-time work because of social distancing, so the number of staff has decreased, you know, and it's like, what policies are they going to bring in that actually benefit young people? What is going to happen? And there's nothing. So
this could be a completely other topic that we
honestly, you could go on for days.
Yeah. We'll have to get you back on to talk about that, because that is a topic that we are very passionate about and we could talk about for a very long time. But I am conscious of time, so let's move on to the second current events topic, which is just basically to talk about how Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been in the news again recently. I saw another headline this morning, which I'm going to have to try and remember as I recite what the summary that I was going to give. Basically, the Duke of Sussex, so Prince Harry, accepted damages recently against the Mail of Sunday for defamatory articles that were posted about him towards the end of last year. And Meghan also won a privacy claim against the Mail on Sunday for publishing a private letter that was written by her to her estranged father. The media have had this sort of strange, sometimes ugly fascination with Prince Harry and Meghan, especially over the last year after they stepped down as senior royals. I can't remember what was the top. I don't know if either of you saw it this morning. Apparently both of them are going to feature on Oprah Winfrey's show. That was what I saw again. But what is it with this media fascination with them? Can either of you answer that?
I'll let you have a crack.
Personally, in my opinion, I think it's a mixture of the fact that she's an American,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that she's mixed race, and or both. So, and I think, I mean, look, I'll give you an idea of how incredibly stupid all these headlines about the pair of them are. Last year, I was actually working for the NHS, and that's where I did my placement year. So, and I actually go and research all this Megxit, Meghan and Harry, because when they announced their departure this time last year, I was kind of busy dealing with COVID. I was busy at work, and, you know, COVID was starting to be a thing. So, and I think this fascination stems from the fact that the Daily Mail, the Mirror, the Sun, and all of these tabloids, they want clicks, they want sales, they want clicks.
Sure.
And it stems from this thing of the obsession that we have with the royals, and, you know, and I think it's this obsession that we have with the royals, and they're these celebrities in our lives that are kind of you know, something to entertain us with, you know, does predate for as long back as we can remember. That is kind of intrinsically baked in our culture surrounding the monarchy. And I think, you know, kind of this Oprah, you know, documentary has come out on the headlines in the past few days. But this was actually rumoured this time last year. I went back and found an article, and this was rumoured back then that they were going to go and do some big tell-all with Oprah. And it was actually that they gave up their royal titles and relinquished all their duties last year on 31st of March. But the decision was to be renewed in 12 months. So it's quite interesting that if decisions are being renewed at this moment in time, and then this documentary's come back out because Harry doesn't want to come back. So, but ultimately, it's the media's ever-dying purpose to get clicks and this kind of tabloid student journalism culture that we have at the moment in our media.
It's so draining for me. Like, there's so many important issues, we've covered some today, that they could be talking about. There's so many things they should be raising awareness of, you know, things that are really impacting people, stuff that needs to be discussed, and constructive conversations that need to be had. And all the time, Brett, you said it, like, we had the discussion about picking the topic for this. You said that you got a notification
from the BBC, saying that she was pregnant. I got a it was a breaking news notification. That's not breaking news.
To be reading about, talking about, it certainly isn't front page news, especially not at the moment. And this, like you say, it's about garnering clicks and, you know, making money, and it's disappointing that that's the position that we're in with journalism in this country. It'd be interesting to, you know, to see what happens on the Oprah show, or, you know, whatever it is. I think that it's not a story that's going away, and as people that kind of discuss this stuff, then, you know, it's kind of worth following and keeping an eye on. But how much does this really impact us? I don't think it really does. I hope they have an amazing life. I don't think it's necessarily something that we need to be following constantly. And the way that it's discussed in many of these tabloids is, I think, it brings us all down. You know, I think it was the Daily Star, wasn't it, that posted that picture with couple that it had their faces kind of blacked out, and it said couple that hate being in the limelight take you know, photo with their new baby or whatever it was. You know, kind of just really degrading, sort of bottom of the barrel nonsense that I think very few of us like to see.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think the problem is with this is that you have, in one kind of camp, you have Meghan turning around saying, I don't want all this attention. But yet, you know, there is this argument that, you know what, she married into the royal family. She already known what happened to Diana. You know, she's kind of sat there. It's like, well, are you seriously whinging about this when there's people starving and dying? But also this kind of camp of, well, aren't they entitled to their own, like, kind of right to privacy?
Yeah.
You know, should we feed off them because they are the royal family? And I think the problem is that the media makes Meghan and Harry worse, and Meghan and Harry make the media worse. It's this vicious cycle. And one thing that's actually funnily never picked up on in the past coming days is how much of taxpayers' money do Meghan and Harry suck up? You know, and I know that they are on their way to becoming financially independent. And if, you know, kind of a documentary with Oprah stops them from kind of, ever having to sit there and go to the Queen with their hand out. Is that a good thing? Now, does it come at the expense of slandering our monarch? That's a debate for another time. But I mean, utterly at the moment of the point is this. I don't really care what they're doing in California. I don't care what their Archibald Spotify deal says, does. Do they go into how to make green tea in California? I don't really care.
No.
What I do care about is the finances of it. And I think a lot of people echo that. But it's like, as you said at the minute, we've got 1,000,001 things to be doing. And I think, this kind of state of our journalism is, and, I touch upon the lockdown thing again, that there's never any positive news out there. It's all this slander and all this doom, gloom, and just kind of this really negative outlook. And I think, what the Daily Star did with the blacked out faces was it, it's just, why did you need to do it? It's kind of, and I think a lot of people share that opinion, that they don't really care what happens to Meghan and Harry. They just want to get on with their lives. They want to get on with lockdown, get the vaccine rolled out, and get back to normal. Maybe if we were in normal times, this would be a different conversation. But definitely at the minute, there is bigger fish to fry than Meghan and Harry.
Do you think part of the annoyance from the tabloids is that with the royal family, there's always kind of been this unwritten agreement that the tabloids, the newspapers, can document the royals' lives, and they're kind of on a string in terms of, if the royal family want to stay relevant, they need the newspapers. If the newspapers want to stay relevant, they need the royal family. That's kind of gone away. They've picked up on this story, and Meghan, who is this kind of outsider who's come into the royal family, stolen away Harry, who was the golden boy, and she's not allowing the British media in particular an insight into their lives. And there's this kind of like poisonous attitude towards them now, because she's kind of not allowing them that sort of unwritten agreement. Do you think that kind of comes into it at all? Because that's kind of how it seems to me a little bit.
I agree with kind of the unwritten agreement sector of it, but to be honest, I think if William had gone and married an American woman or a mixed race woman or both, such as Meghan, I do think there would be more media uproar, because one of the issues with Harry is he's not in line to the throne. It's actually, he's kind of always sat there on the outskirts. He actually went and was allowed to go and serve in the army. I think it was the Royal Air Force actually that he went and served in. And there's always been them big questions of, oh, well, is he actually Charles's son? So, and to be honest, I think that there is this unwritten rule with the monarchy that because they sit there on their clouds of luxury in their luxury mansions, what cost do they actually bring to the taxpayer? Yes, they do bring in money from tourism, but is that still kind of relevant? And I think in a way that it's a fine line and balance, but I think bullying Meghan in the same way that Diana was bullied is not healthy. And I think it's just kind of a reflection of our gutter barrel journalism that is going on at the minute. And people are seeing through it. People are seeing through the likes of Sky News, through the likes of the BBC, and is the BBC still relevant? That's a massive debate that's going on at the minute, and certainly a debate for another time. But people are seeing through it, and I think especially with the pandemic, people are kind of thinking, well, yeah, all right then, but when's my vaccine coming? So yeah, definitely topics for other times, and people just don't care, I don't think.
No,
definitely more important topics, I think. I agree. Let's move on to quick fire questions then, shall we? My first question is based on a news article that came up today, and we've also put a poll up, which at the time of recording is still up to vote on, but obviously people won't be able to access it.
Do you know what, off the top of your head, what the sort of answers are? The percentages
Yes,
are?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, vaguely, yeah. So the question is the silencing of free speech an issue on university campuses?
Yes.
Can I invoke the nuance card?
Yeah, you can invoke the nuance.
I would say there's a sort of nuanced position. I think it depends on campus to campus, and I think there probably is a slight issue, but it is majorly overblown a lot of the time. That would kind of be my that would be kind of my perception of it, because we've had our free speech on campus issue, Brett. There was a interview that was organised with Peter Hitchens, a debate that was postponed by the student union in Portsmouth, and I was pretty vocal against the student union, met with the student union at the time to ask them why it was cancelled, because I wanted to question Peter Hitchens myself, thought it'd be a great opportunity, and was very disappointed not to be able to do that. So it happens, and it is an issue, but I don't think it's nearly as much of an issue as many people think it is.
See, I disagree. I mean, personally, like myself in Liverpool, I disagree with that, because I am on that campus that is so left-wing, and that is so kind of, there is one argument, you cannot hear another argument. And personally, my view on it is that we need to show to the likes of lefty student unions, lefty university unions, the staffing unions, that you cannot silence conservative debate, you cannot silence guest speakers. And I think kind of one of the interesting things that's coming along with the free speech bill is this cancelling of students, which I massively agree with. I've been a victim to it myself. My university sat there and said, yes, the tab can write 5 different articles about yourself. They can target you, misrepresent you, and harass you because it's free speech. Well, that's not free speech, So I think that there is work to be done, but I do agree with Jack that it does differ from university campus to university campus. But personally, I am keen on preventative measures, so it will be interesting to see how it comes along. But I don't know, maybe it's just the libertarian that's deep inside of me kind of coming out with those things. So it will be interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this with you maybe in another time, because I think it's a really interesting topic, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, particularly as guarding against, like, protecting free speech. And I think that these suggestions by government are also very interesting. So it's something that there needs to be more conversation about, I think.
For sure. I think there needs to be a line for where what becomes abusive, because I think that's the issue with a lot of these with especially with the situation with Peter Hitchens, the issue was that he was accused of saying things that were deemed as potentially abusive to certain communities.
Yeah, he was meant to be speaking during LGBT History Month, which is this month.
Yeah.
The complaints were made and saying that it's not right to have somebody with anti-LGBT views speak at the university during LGBT History Month. The reason that I wanted him to come was because I wanted to question him on his views. The best way for me, in my opinion, to stand up for what I believe in is to question him on those views, which is why I wanted him to come. To me, that's the essence of free speech. And it was postponed, and then Peter Hitchens refused to reorganise the event because he said that he was being silenced. He could have come the next month, but he didn't want to, because for him it was a good publicity opportunity, which is why I think that's why I take that nuanced position.
Yeah. I think I would agree.
Definitely,
and there needs to be... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that line definitely needs to be become less blurred, and there needs to be more conversation about it from an unbiased point of view, obviously.
Yeah.
At the moment, the poll stands at 50% saying yes, 44% saying no, and 6% saying unsure.
Interesting.
So it's quite divisive. My next question is: are you for or against homeschooling?
Oh, I'd say against.
That's a bloody good question. That I'd say against as well.
Interesting, even given the last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say yes, but my thing is with this homeschooling is that I believe that all parents should have the free right to choose. But then, I mean, personally for myself, like, I'm a big stickler for things like consent education, sex education, relationships education.
Yeah.
So personally, I do think children need to be in school. And if a child chooses to be homeschooled, it's that how do you then make sure that they teach that, whether it be making them come into the local school one afternoon. And it's like, oh, well, you can homeschool your child, but you've got to bring them in on XYZ day for PSHE education. So, but I think that homeschooling is not something keen on for the general public. I think a lot of parents have struggled. I think it was okay during the first one, but now everybody is sat here like, no, children need to be in school. It's quite difficult. And it's not also the educational aspect of it, it's actually the social aspect of it. And certainly for children that are in essence only child or have siblings that do not live in the home, they don't interact with any other children. So I think that homeschooling is a policy that is not going to be taken upon fondly after the last year.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think obviously, the parents should have the choice, but I think that it's probably more beneficial for the child to be in school. My third question is, again, based on another article I saw today. The question is, should burning wood at home be banned? Because a new report came out today saying that the highest cause of air pollution in the UK now is burning wood in your households or, fireplaces. Yeah.
I'm so anti this because I love a proper wood fire. And there's nothing nicer than, getting the fire on, sit around the fire. But if it, that pollution argument, it's probably quite a strong one. Especially in more built up areas, I guess. So, yeah, my gut says no, but maybe it's just my love of a fire.
I think the thing is that I think wood burners can be very advantageous in some ways, but disadvantageous in others, mainly dangerous being in one of them, and then the overall long-term air pollution effect. So I think if we had a situation where, we had the market providing efficient log burners, safe log burners, guidance from the fire service on this is how to do it properly, this is how to keep yourself safe, then I think they probably would be more of a popular item. But ultimately, I think at the moment that, especially over the past year, if people choose to use a log burner because it's more efficient for their utility bills and their expenditure, then so be it, as long as they're doing it safely. May I stress that? Don't want nobody setting themselves on fire.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do more sort of. I probably should have done more research before asking the question into like what that's based on. Is it based on the last year? Because I imagine that air pollution has gone down in terms of traffic over the last year. So I don't know if during normal times, then the air pollution would be higher because of cars and planes and whatnot. But I don't know. I mean, they're not really needed anymore, are they? Fireplaces. They're meant to keep that. They were meant to keep the house warm, and obviously we have better heating systems these days. So I get what you're saying, because I do really like a house. I was gonna say a house fire. I don't like a house fire. No, I like a fireplace, and it's quite relaxing. It's nice to watch. It's but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question, though. My next question, yeah. I mean, already in some of I've been looking at flats recently because we're moving. A lot of places have old decommissioned fireplaces in them already anyway, so it's not like they're super popular these days, I think. But my fourth question is, do you think birthday cards should still be a thing?
Yes.
Really? I'm not a fan. Is that just...
See... sorry, go on, Jack. Sorry.
It might just be me really like... I don't know what the word is. Shallow. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's nice, it's thoughtful. You get a card, you open it, and for me, that'll stay on the side for a few days, or I'll put it up I'll file it away somewhere. I'm not going to say that I chuck them away necessarily, but you can just text somebody now, right? Is that really?
I don't know. I mean, personally, I'm a keen preserver of tradition, in some ways, but things like birthday cards. One thing that I now know is a thing after COVID is electronic cards. I got an electronic Christmas card for the first time this year. Yeah. But I think a birthday card is a great cop out. When you don't really know a person, it's that new person at work, they've not been there for long. You get them a card and you get, I'll buy you a coffee.
Yeah.
So personally, I do think we should keep birthday cards. And I think birthday cards are one of those things that you can customize and affect to how much you want to show your appreciation to somebody. So yes, I am for keeping birthday cards.
They can be quite personal, but then again, I'm of the argument that you can just send a message to people now, and with the same effect. Yeah,
I feel like you can, but like, what do you do? Like, I feel like if it, if my nan's birthday ever went by, and I hadn't got her a card,
sure.
I feel like she would be very questioning of that.
Yeah,
I think it very depends on who's the recipient, but personally, yes, I am a fan of a birthday card. It's a nice thing to, and it's a good place to put money if you're giving money to somebody as well.
True. Yeah.
True. What do you guys do with your birthday cards after you've received them? Do you keep them all, or do you
leave them on the side until I move? Because I know the thing is, for me, because I've done like a year in industry placement and stuff like that, like I've moved every year I've been at uni, so generally when I get a birthday card, it actually just stays on the side until either my mum throws it away or it just kind of gets like put in a pile. I hate throwing them away personally. I think that if somebody takes the time to write you a card, it's something to be grateful of, because they've shown their appreciation to you. But I don't know, maybe that's like the traditional.
No, it's good.
List in me, but yes, personally, that's my opinion. So
I'm going to sound really heartless because no, my last birthday, it was the first time that I got rid of all of them. I sometimes I'll keep the ones that mean the most to me, like from my close family members or whatever, or close friends, but all the ones that I think look the nicest or aren't just clearly somebody's gone out and quickly written "Happy Birthday, Brett" and then sent it. To me, I don't see the point in keeping them, because I've kept them in the past and they end up just taking up a load of space in a box, and I never really look at them again. So it's just, I'm not particularly a hoarder, so I find I just don't see the point in having them, really, I guess. Yeah. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I am a heartless bastard, but my final question is, what's your favourite shape?
Oh,
you're way more excited about this question than I am.
It's a really hard question. I don't know, actually. To be honest, I'm going to say a triangle. Because it's not a square, but it's not round. This is going to actually prove how intellectually incapable I am answering questions like this. I don't know. I think the thing is that a triangle, because it's not boring like a square, but it's not unstructured like a circle.
28 episodes in, and Brett is finally at the quickfire question. What is your favourite shape?
Goodness.
Rectangle.
Right, because it's just a slightly more interesting square, or
I don't have an answer, mate. That's as good as you're going to get from me, I'm afraid.
I'm surprised you didn't go for something like a hexagon or something, because
they have no use, really, do they?
Yeah, but they're cool.
I don't know. What's yours, Brett?
I don't know. I was thinking I like stars a shape as well, like the classic star symbol, or the like a heart, or like a crescent. Is that a shape as well? I like a crescent.
It is a shape.
Oh.
Yeah. So I might go for a crescent.
Well, you've had more time to think about it than us.
I literally just came up with that then. I was planning on saying like triangle or circle or something, but then I thought of that. And
nice. That's a good answer.
So... Anyway.
I've never had a question of it.
Generally, our quickfire questions can be the most divisive because of people get very passionate about sometimes we ask about food or whatever. So, but yeah. Today it was shapes. Thank you so much for joining us, Olivia. It's been really interesting.
Thank you so much.
We definitely need to have you on again, because I'm sure we could have spoken about many different things for hours.
Honestly, don't offer it to me, because I'll never finish chewing your ear off. So.
How can people get in touch with you or Blue Beyond if they want to get involved?
So if you want to get involved with us at Blue Beyond, you can head to our website. It's just Blue Beyond, www.bluebeyonduk.com. If you want to get in touch with me personally, you can get in touch with me via my Twitter. My email is in my Twitter handle. In my Twitter bio. So it's at liv _lever Lever. And you can generally reach me there. If you've got any questions about Blue Beyond, just shoot me a line. We're always looking for new team members, always looking for people to get involved with us, partner with us. We're pretty much an open group. We're pretty easy going with stuff. So yes, just get in touch. And can I just stress again, thank you for having me on. Since the lack of the pub and university society socials, I have nobody to argue with. So it's just coming out in episodes and seminars. So you provided me with a great opportunity. Thank you so much.
You're always welcome back. You're always welcome back.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. All the links that you've just said will be in our description, so if anybody needs them, look out for them. And remember to like the video if you liked it, or the podcast wherever you're listening to it, and subscribe to us or follow. We'll see you next week.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you.